Hey guys, YouTube 100 here. All right, now here I am continuing on with these uh, horror movie reviews this year. And now, next up for my next review, this is going to be a review for The Omen. So, yeah, so of course, like this is like probably one of the most famous horror movies of all time. Yeah, if you're a fan of horror films, chances are that you have seen this movie. I mean, just yeah, I'm sure that just about like all of you know this movie. Like this film really is just about the Antichrist. Yeah, I mean, the film story. I mean, you all really know it, right? Yeah, it's a film about like a couple that ends up like adopting a boy during infancy. But then as he gets a little older, then they are like noticing that there's some stuff going on with like the way that he acts and just like the stuff that's going on all around him. And yeah, then they start looking into it, and then yeah, then they eventually do like discover that he is indeed the Antichrist. Yeah. So yeah, so this movie is like a kind of similar to Evil Dead. If you did see my review for the Evil Dead, I was talking about how like for like basically like all that movie, you really never actually do like see like the monsters there's ever on screen, but you just like see like all this stuff going on, and you're not really like too sure exactly like what is really happening. This film is kind of done in the same way because for like a good chunk of this film, like really just you really just really have no idea what the hell is really happening. Like there's just like all this stuff going on with like people dying and stuff, yeah, but yeah, the the boy is really not the one that is actually doing it. So yeah, so it really just does make you like really wonder like what the hell is really happening here. So yeah, so this is like another one of those like sort of like mysterious type of horror films where like the there is a monster, but you don't really like actually like see the monster really like doing anything, but you just like know it's there, and they are actually like really like up to something, but you really don't know what. Yeah, and yeah, you really don't know like for a good chunk of the film exactly what is going on, and they eventually do reveal it in like the last third or so of the movie. Yeah. Yeah. So this film was released in 1976. Yeah, and ever since then, like like I said, it really has just been like looked at as probably like one of the most famous horror films of all time. Yeah, and some of the like stuff that does happen in the film, it is like a pretty violent. Like whenever like somebody does get hurt or killed in the movie, it is done pretty violently. Like at one point, there's like this bit where like there's a decapitation, and then yeah, then you like there's one like there's also like an impalement in the movie, yeah, and some other sort of deaths like that throughout the movie as well. So yeah, so the murders in the film are really like pretty violent, yeah, and something that is really like kind of like unusual or unorthodox about this movie is despite the fact that it is a horror movie and it is rated R, like there really is not like any sort of like curse words in it. Like there's not really like any sort of swearing in the movie at all. But yeah, it is like a very dark, violent, and just very mysterious type of movie. So yeah, so that is just like very like interesting for a horror film to really like not really like have its rating because of its language, but yeah, because of like the material that really is in the movie. Yeah, and I really do feel that like the story in this film is probably like every parent's worst nightmare. I mean, can you really imagine if your child really was just like this? If the child was really like the Antichrist? I mean, I know there are like some children that are just like really badly behaved and stuff, but can you imagine if they were actually the Antichrist? Like they really were? Like seriously, that would just probably. I think that's really just every parent's worst nightmare to have a child that really is just the Antichrist. I mean, seriously, like that would, like I really do feel that like that would really just like give people like a whole bunch of nightmares to think about that. Yeah. So yeah, so the movie really is like a really good. I mean, this. this, it does a really good job of telling the story. And I really do like how they really do tell it. I do like how at first the Damien the boy, he really just seems like just a just fine. But then yeah, then as the film progresses, just as you see how he's acting and just how some of the stuff that just happened around him, you really do realize what is going. Like something really is up with him, but you really don't know what. And then they eventually do reveal that he is the Antichrist. Yeah, so the film really does a good job of really telling the story and kind of just slowly building up to the revelation of it. But and everybody in the movie I think does do pretty good. Like the film has a cast like Gregory Peck, Remick, David Warner, Billy Whitelaw, uh, uh, Patrick Troughton, and Martin Benson, and Harvey Spencer Stevens, and and everybody in the film, I do think that they all do pretty good. I mean, the kid that plays Damien does do a pretty good job, really just acting very sort of mysterious throughout the film, and it really does show at points he really does just snap and go crazy. Yeah, and just all this stuff that is going on, I really do think that the film really does do a good job, really making it very dark and mysterious. So so I do think that this is definitely a really good film, and and it is among the best horror films of all time. So so I guess I would probably give this movie. I guess I would give it around 3.5 stars out of 4. Yeah, it is definitely a really good movie. So yeah, so so I guess I'll just start talking about the premise of the movie. Yeah. So as the film opens up, it shows that there's an American diplomat named Robert Horn, who's living in Rome with his wife Kathy. Yeah, but then when it shows that Kathy like uh, was pregnant, and then she ended up giving a birth to a baby boy, but he ended up the baby ended up dying. Yeah. So then and the hospital chaplain, Father Spoleto, yeah, then convinced Robert then to adopt a another baby boy that his mother just died while in childbirth. So then Robert then decides to adopt the other baby, and then he gives Kathy the boy, but he doesn't actually tell Kathy that the child isn't their own. Yeah, and so then they ended up naming the child Damien. Yeah, and then after 5 years, as Robert then was became the ambassador to the United Kingdom, and then showed how there was just some very mysterious stuff going on. Sorry, it showed there was this very just a deranged Rottweiler that appeared at their home, and also showed how during Damien's fifth birthday party, his nanny just ended up hanging herself. So so that's another sort of a graphic death, actually hanging, and it's in front of kids. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if somebody just like hang themselves in front of children? Oh, that would be awful. Yeah. Yeah. Then it showed how just there was this new nanny, Mrs. Baylock, that ended up just arriving unannounced. Yeah. Then it also there was also this point where as a Albert and Kathy and Damien were arriving at a church. It showed how Damien just ended up going crazy and just resisted entering church very violently. It showed he just ended up attacking Kathy. So so you just see all this stuff is going on. Yeah. Then there was also this moment where as the Thorns were visiting in a wildlife park. It showed how like all the animals there were just like turning away from Damien and just running off. Yeah, it even showed at one point how like there was like this like a group of monkeys that ended up like going crazy. Yeah, like they were just like jumping like all over the outside of the car. Yeah. So with all this stuff going on, like you really did like show you how like there was something really like just going on, but we really didn't know what it was. Yeah, yeah. Then later on, Father Brennan then was speaking with Robert and was just like warning him about Damien's origins, and it was just hinting that like Damien really like is not a human, and was just like insisting that Robert should take communion. Yeah, yeah. Then Robert then like was informed that Damien is actually the son of Satan, and Kathy is also pregnant, and that Damien will kill his unborn sibling and parents unless he's killed himself. Yeah, yeah. Then you just like there was this like bit where like Father Brennan was like outside like a church or something, and there was this like big storm, and then it ended up like knocking a pole off of like one of the off of the roof, and then it ended up just like falling down onto Brennan, impaling him, killing him. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, then when Kathy was pregnant, then like she was like saying to Robert how like she wanted an abortion, but Robert opposed it. And then yeah, then eventually, then at one point, then Damien ended up like knocking Kathy over a railing down to the floor, and yeah, then you just like saw when like she hit the ground, you saw how like she was like bleeding from her head, and then yeah, and it was also like revealed that she did suffer some internal bleeding from the fall. Yeah. Yeah. Then later on, it showed how like there was this photographer named Keith Jennings that noticed some shadows in photos of na- the nanny and Father Brennan, and then that like was presaging their deaths. And so uh, then when Keith then like showed the photos to Robert with like some news clippings of like some biblical passages that are like suggesting coming of the Antichrist. Then Robert and Father Brennan then visited uh, Rome to try to look into Damien's birth, and then they then like they learned that apparently like uh, Kathy's maternity records were destroyed in a fire. Yeah. Then it showed how like they discovered a father Spoleto like just like in a monastery. He and it just showed like how he was just in really bad condition. It showed like how he was a mute, blind in one eye, and partially paralyzed. But then he then like directed them to a cemetery, and then yeah, then they were, and that was where Damien's biological mother was actually buried. So then, as Brennan and well, not Brennan, as uh, Keith and Robert then visited the cemetery and found Damien's mother's grave. Hey, they ended up like finding like a jackal carcass is and a child's skeleton in Damien's mother's grave, and so then like yeah, so it was then like a revealed that apparently like the jackal was Damien's mother and the child was Robert's own son, and that was killed so Damien could take his place. Yeah, then later on, as Kathy was in the hospital, Robert like called her and just told her that she has to leave London. But before she was able to do it, Mrs. Baylock then appeared and then just threw Kathy out out from a window. And then yeah, Kathy then just ended up just flying down through an ambulance and ended up killing her. Yeah. Yeah. Then eventually, then an Antichrist expert, Carl Bugenhagen, told Robert and Keith that if Damien really is an Antichrist, then there would be a birthmark mark in the shape of three sixes on him. And yeah, so then uh, Carl then like gave Robert like several daggers to kill Damien on hallowed ground. Yeah. Yeah, but then as Robert then was just like refusing to actually kill Damien, he or to stab him, as he just like threw the knives away. Keith went to retrieve them, but then there was like this truck that like was parked, but then it somehow like just ended up like shifting into reverse, and it ended up decapitating Keith with a sheet of glass. Yeah. Yeah. Then eventually, then Robert then like found Damien, and then he then like discovered the birthmark on Damien's scalp. Yeah. Then Mrs. Baylock then like went after Robert, but then Robert then eventually ended up stabbing Mrs. Baylock to death. Yeah. Yeah. Then Robert then took Damien and then drove to a cathedral, but yeah, but the police then like were around and then just saw like his erratic driving, and so then the police like followed Robert over to the cathedral. Yeah, and then as Robert like just dragged Damien onto the altar, like Damien was of course like just like going crazy again and screaming. And then Robert then like held Damien down, setting up to stab him to death. But before he could, then the police then arrived and then shot Robert and killed him. Yeah, and then the movie then like just ended with a double funeral for Kathy and Robert. Yeah, and then it showed how like the U.S. president and the first lady attended the funeral along with Damien. Then the final shot just like showed Damien, and then he looked towards the camera and just smiled. Yeah, and that's how it ended. So Damien was not even like destroyed in this movie, so he survived through it. And of course, like this movie would end up like spawning some sequels as well with like some the stuff with Damien continuing. But yeah, it's kind of like very unusual that like the monster for the movie ends up surviving. Like he's not killed. Well, yeah, so I don't know if they decided to go down that route because they couldn't actually like go through with killing a child. I don't know if they thought that would be too far or what, but yeah, just very like unusual that they decided like to keep the monster in the movie alive. So yeah, so very unusual ending. And yeah. But yeah, like I said, this is a really good movie. The story's told really well. It does a very good job of like really being like very like mysterious and dark. And yeah, and like I said, just very like interesting that they went with the approach of like no curse words, but still making it like a very dark and mysterious and violent movie. Like the deaths in the movie really are violent, like the hanging, the impalement, the decapitating. So yeah, so the deaths really are like pretty violent in the movie. Yeah, and plus yeah, it's just like very mysterious because yeah, like I said, like in this movie, like for a lot of the stuff that does happen, Damien really is not the one that really does do the stuff. So yeah, so it really just really makes you like wonder like really like what the hell is really going on throughout the movie. So yeah, so it does a really good job of like really being like very mysterious and dark. Yeah. So like I said, I give this film 3.5 stars out of 4. Yeah, definitely like among the best horror films of all time, and yeah, and it is definitely like one of the most famous ones as well. So yeah, if you are a horror movie fan, you probably have seen it, but if by some chance you haven't, definitely give it a watch. All right. So I guess that's all I can really say about it. All right. So this does it for my review of The Omen. So I hope you guys did enjoy this review. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.